Yeah, so I think it's probably time to get started. Today's class is based on the Move Your DNA series that I did a couple of years ago over the summer. And the idea behind today's class is less to do technical exercise and more to work with some ideas around sitting on the floor. So maybe just give me a sense of whether you are already incorporating floor time into your life just by kind of giving me a yes or a no or a lots or a little bit kind of in the comments, because I'm kind of curious, and that would help me shape this class a little bit. But my intention was to just kind of go over not only a number of positions that we can use when we're floor sitting, but some of the transitions up and down, because the transitions up and down are very much a part of this whole spectrum of movement. The reason the floor sitting is awesome is it's twofold. It's one, because you get is because you get the up and down movement. So if you try going up and down a bunch, you'll start to realize that it's challenging. So that's what we're going to start with. So I'd like everyone to just start seated and actually lay yourself down. Just for fun, we'll do it from lying down instead of from standing. And then however you like, you're just gonna stand up. And then however you like, you're just gonna lie down again. And we're gonna keep going. Now, if you notice that the way that you like is the way that you always go, which is what I'm doing right now, try doing it another way. So try, instead of your left arm being what you reach out with, try it with your right arm. And notice if you are using your arms. Most people are going to, because that spreads the work around, and our bodies like spreading the work around. If you want to switch things up, you could cross your arms over your chest and see what it's like to do this with no arms, and see what your strategy is. Kind of see if you can do it on both sides, because it's much harder for me to do it rolling to my right than my left. And you're just gonna keep picking yourself all the way up and then dropping yourself all the way back down. I'm gonna check in on the comments while you do that a few more times. Some floor sitting transitions sometimes. Awesome. Good. Well, I'm super glad to see that. You guys are just still going down and getting up, because floor sitting is such a powerful tool that solves that dilemma of how we move more in a modern life that really doesn't give you enough time to get the movement requirements that our bodies need. So let's all come down to the ground and take a second and just notice how much work that maybe minute of up and down was. So, hi Anne, good to see you. That work is not lessened when you spread it over the day. You don't get the same kind of heart-pounding benefits, but you still get the work. So that is reason number one. Now, reason number two is that it gives your hips a whole bunch of variety that we don't get in chairs. So let's now play with that. We're gonna start cross-legged. Grab your half dome and stick it under your butt if you like, but we're gonna move it after a while, so we'll start with it. Put your hands behind you for a second. I'm gonna go actually sideways too here. Put your hands behind you, prop yourself up, and with your legs crossed, you're gonna just start rolling your pelvis back and forth, tucked and untucked. Well, Cindy, I'm a confirmed floor sitter, so I'm sure when you practice enough, you too will be able to do all the floor sitting all the ways. I'm just joking. You know, we do spend a lot of time on the floor, so it's helpful for sure. And these little exercises, you know, you can do any of these movements as an exercise and build that capacity. So we're gonna play around with that. So right now we're just rocking and rolling our pelvis. If you notice as you're doing this that your knees are tending to lift and lower, see if you can get out of that. See if you can leave your hips relaxed and just make this about your hands pushing your pelvis into a tucked and an untucked kind of position. So although I generally advise sitting for long periods with an untucked pelvis because that helps normalize the relationship of the pelvic floor muscles to the rest of your body. There's nothing wrong with sitting in a tucked pelvis, and there's nothing wrong with exploring all these movements. And each time we're moving our pelvis here, we're giving our hips a little bit of movement love, because the hips and the pelvis have to change their relationship to one another as we're rolling here. Let's cross our legs the other way. And we'll just keep rocking and rolling. If you want to, you could turn this into a propelled with your feet exercise. So you can push into your feet to tuck, pull towards your feet to untuck. But you're welcome to just use your hands. I'm kind of a fan of using my hands for all of these rolling pelvis exercises. They just feel better to me. Good morning, Simon. So just changing the cross of your legs is a tool that you can use to add variety. And it feels like a small one, but the small tools are often the best ones because they're the ones we can use most easily. And to your body, it makes a difference. So that's good to think about. You could also lengthen your heels away from you a little bit and do this kind of weird leg cross. That definitely does not feel as awesome to my mind. We'll do a couple more here. And then we're going to come back into cross-legged just on the ground. So obviously sitting when you're doing stuff, you're not necessarily going to be adding a lot of exercise type movement, but you can add quite a few really nice reaches to floor sitting, and I imagine you're mostly familiar with them, but let's all try it together. Let's just lean forward and reach out super far towards the end of your mat over your feet. Pretend that someone has put a delicious plate of your favorite breakfast about 6 inches in front of your fingers, and really go for it. So your pelvis is going to untuck here, but your spine is going to get involved, and maybe your scapula. You really, really want to use everything here. This is a all hands on deck reach. And then you can pull back up. Start by untucking your pelvis. Feel yourself roll over your sit bones. Reach all the way forward. And that was 2 on this side. So how about we switch our leg here? So my right leg is in front, your other leg is now in front. And reach forward here. Try to grab, see, I'm envisioning this delicious plate of Eggs Benedict. That is probably what I would go for this morning. Now that my mother has broken down my gluten eating barriers completely. Let's reach again. So just really feeling the deliciousness of that feeling of going for something a little further out than our center. Really getting all the muscles involved there. And let's switch back. So first leg is in front again. We'll do 1 more in each direction. Big reach forward. And then other side. Big reach forward here. All right. So my favorite working floor sitting movement, your left side butt. All right, good discovery. So that means that your left side butt could probably use a little more love. And let's get me into this, and I just have a comment to make about that. So same thing here, you could have a half dome under you, but you probably don't need one because we're trying to create a movement that's a little bit out of your neutral anyway. So you can take your hands on your ASISs and roll forward, and you can put your hands on the floor, and you're just kind of letting the inner thighs get loaded a little bit here. It's a pretty classic gym stretch. But a really nice way to experience loading in the inner thighs to notice if you have tightness. So, Lori, what you're saying about your restriction there, it really kind of, for me, brings up this thought that's so interesting, because when you have a single bit that's not doing its thing, those bits often prevent you from accessing your other bits. So, you know, if your feet hurt, you can't walk, and then you get a loss of bone density in your hips. So there's these really interesting carry-on effects, which is why it pays off to kind of find those sore bits and figure out what you need to do to get them into the party, you know? All right, so we're just leaning forward here, but what if you walked your hands over towards the left and reach a little bit? Think still about untucking as your first movement. Your spine is probably not even close to neutral here, but the untuck of the pelvis is kind of what we want to do to get the hip load happening here. You could walk all the way over towards your foot if you wanted to, and then you could walk back the other direction. So really all we're doing here is bringing some loads into kind of the inner thighs. And I can hang out here on the right for a minute. So this is a range where I have quite a lot of range of motion. I don't think that I don't think that's necessarily very helpful. It's a bit hypermobile for me. So again, don't look at my body and think that that's what you should look like. But you should not feel super restricted here either. So it's a range that's good to have. Okay, so let's move into more of a leg out in front position. So you could bolster here, but you could also just lean back with your arms. When you bolster your pelvis, you're doing something similar to when you lean back with your arms. So this would be a really nice floor sitting position for watching TV or whatever. And you could move out your one foot a little wide and press your pelvis into a less tucked position so that you're getting a little bit of a squatting input here. So this relationship of my right leg to my pelvis is a bit of a squatting relationship. And we'll go with the other side as well. So left leg out, right leg straight out. Posting back, what this does is if your hamstrings will only let you bend to, I don't know, 120 degrees, whatever this is, and you come further forward, you have to hunch over your low back. That's what you have to do if your hamstrings won't let your pelvis come to neutral. So by putting your hands back, you're just allowing yourself to be in the shape that your body is currently in. And it really is the same with bolstering. The bolstering allows the angle of your sitting to meet where your body's at. So hands back is good. The hands back is also good as part of one of my favorite floor transitions. So we're going to play with that a little bit. And I'm actually let's switch sides again. So right leg is up, left leg is out. Left hand is gonna be your working hand here. So I'd like you to try pressing into your right foot and left hand and bringing your left leg to underneath your left shoulder. And then from here, you can just get right up. It is a tripod transition. Left hand reaches down next to the left foot. Left foot reaches out straight. Let's try that a couple more times. So left hand is posted. Left foot walks back by where your left butt cheek was. And then you stand up from there. So I made a video out of the tripods on my YouTube because the tripods are so fun. And this is the most functional tripod. It's a really nice way to get up off the floor. Left hand is behind. Left foot comes to left butt cheek. And you just step up. Let's try that 2 more times. If anyone has any questions about it, go ahead and ask anytime, and then we'll switch to the right side. So left hand posts down, left foot comes back, standing up. You're coming down to this kind of crouch position. You could, if you wanted to, think about a vertical shin for as long as possible. You would come into a full squat if you have a full squat, and then that left leg reaches out, and you're back on the floor. So I'm going to swivel so you can see me on this side. Right leg is out now. Right hand is back. Right foot comes, and you just kind of roll over and push up. It's quite a fluid motion, I find. Right hand goes down, right foot goes up. Right hand goes down, right foot comes back, standing all the way up. Right hand down, right foot forward. You could pause in the middle. Right foot Your right hand, right foot, and up. Harder on the left. Yeah. Yeah, there's almost always some imbalance and asymmetry. Right foot is out, right hand is back, foot comes back. And coming down one more time. So, one of the advantages of floor sittings, as well as hips, you can work on your feet. This is, I find, less sustainable from the point of view of if I was working, it's hard to do for a while, but if you're watching TV or whatever on the floor, all the kneeling variations are really great. So if this is hard on your feet or knees, the easiest option is to come more forward and load less. But you can play with the load by sitting backwards towards your heels. And if you feel good here, you can keep going. You can even lean back a little bit to really load up your feet. When you're kneeling, one of the best things to think about is where your foot and ankles are. You can't get your heels down, that's fine, Kinney. If you can't get your heels down, then you can't get your heels down, and this is a place where we have a functional movement going on, so you just work with where you're at for this one. The heels may or may not come later. So for this one though, you want to think about the inside edges of your feet being parallel to one another or reasonably parallel rather than that sickling happening. So that sickling is very like what you'll tend to see in top of the foot stretch where your ankle bows out to the side. So we're trying to get a straight line of force down on the front of the ankle here. So again, you can come forward if you need a break, go back if you want a little bit of extra. And the same would apply if you were to tuck your toes under. So I know that if you don't have the big toe dorsiflexion for this, it's quite challenging. So definitely feel free to come very far forward, or this is a place where you could use your half dome under your knees, and that will decrease the load on the dorsiflexion as well. So I can stay here, I have this range, but I can't stay here for very long, so I will use the bolstering to kind of increase the time that I can be here for as well, which is a nice option. Wherever you're at in your kneeling, and you can choose to kneel with your toes curled under or flat for this next exercise. I'm just going to swivel around so you can see me. Kneeling is a really nice place to add some sideways reaching or side bending. So very like a thoracic car, you can just reach over, and you can take your top hand over as well here. Try to keep the weight of your pelvis even on your heels. And then coming straight back up, and then reaching over into the side. And whenever you're reaching, the more committed you are to the reach, the better your reach is going to be. So you want to really imagine that there's something that you totally want 10 inches away from your fingers. And I'm sticking with my eggs benedict because for some reason I feel like I could eat that right now. Another thing to do is to stop thinking about breakfast and to start thinking about breathing into the ribs that are most tensioned when you're in a side bend. And I know I teach this a lot, but I don't think you can do it too much. I mean, you can, but most of us are really tight through our rib cage, and using our breath to add this sort of internal loading as we're stretching the ribs is just such a helpful input. So as you're here, I want you to take a really deep breath in. I want you to fill up through that whole left side rib area, really reach. Imagine using your breath to expand your spine and rib cage. Breathe all the way out too. That's often the part we forget. So that's going to engage your whole lower abdominal area as you breathe out. We'll do one more in this direction, like so. So, you know, to the extent that what you're doing on the floor is editing videos, that's what I do on the floor these days, these exercises are nice to sort of mix in as a little bit of extra kind of like just mini movements. So we're going to come back to toes pointed behind us. Modify if you need to by having your hands in front of you. And I'm just going to show you from the front. You're just going to slowly roll over towards your left and see if you can land on your left hip. And then you're going to pick yourself up and see if you can then land on your right hip. Just gently rolling side to side here. If you notice that there's a clunk as you come down to the side, so if you find that at a certain point, that's what you need to do, that's your time to bolster. So wherever you lose control of the movement, just throw a blanket or a half dome underneath your hip so that you can work within your controlled range. And this movement requires both hip mobility and core stuff. The actual movement is kind of being created by the lower leg in a lot of ways. So this one gets a lot of stuff without it being a particularly huge movement. It's pretty cool. You can just play with that a few times. You could add a reach. So you're on your right side, you're going to reach your hands over to the left or vice versa. Really try to lengthen through the whole lowered hip side, and then you can come back up. What's going on when you clunk? You mean when you like lose control, or just when you have a deep clunk in your hip? Reaching over to the other side. So good. Okay. So how about playing with some figure four variations? You can tuck one leg in and have your other leg up in front. Yeah, they're nice, hey? Let's just, I'll answer that in just one question, Anne. In one question. Oh my God. Okay. Let's roll over our bottom leg here. So you're starting, can you see, with one leg kind of tucked under like you were doing a cross-legged sit. Your other leg is like a squatting leg. And then what you're going to do is reach forward and roll and see if you can get onto that bottom shin with your front leg much more in a squat. And then if you didn't have a wall behind you, you could sit back down. I'm just going to move the camera. That's awesome. Okay, so you guys can just kind of work on forward and back. And I often will just switch sides each time here. So bottom leg comes into this number 4 position. Top leg is in this squatting position. You're going to reach forward and you're going to see if you can come to this kind of half kneeling position. Hi, Simrana. Okay, so Lori wants to know why she doesn't have the strength to go side to side without using her hands. Lori, not to be facetious, but it's probably because you don't do it very often. You know, I practice this stuff, so my body is used to doing it. It is not a problem to use your hands, but it's nice to develop the capacity to do it without using your hands. A lot of this stuff is hip mobility. So all the cars, all the hip mobility stuff that that we do is designed to, it's not designed to help you with this stuff, but it will help you with this stuff. And Kinney, yes, of course it's okay to use your hands, but again, if you have to use your hands, if you don't have the option not to use your hands, then it's telling you that there's a capacity that you have an option to work on. And in terms of what's happening when you're losing control in that particular exercise, I don't know which particular capacity is making it difficult for you, because it depends upon your core mobility and your hip mobility. Those would be the things I would think about looking at. But at some level too, it could just be because it's a movement you don't practice too often. So I would say that would be one to practice regularly, and especially as you keep working on spinal mobility and hip stuff, see how that changes. I'm very bendy too, right? So I'm not always a good model of what sort of should be happening. And Kinney's saying that if she bolsters, she doesn't need her hands. And sure, that's part of the reason we use our hands, is because we don't have a range, and so our hands are a bolster, essentially. Let's do a few more get-ups. Here again, we're going to look at one where, where people tend to get clunky. So you can come into kind of this is I think called a high kneeling position, and step forward with one foot. And since we're here, let's do a little bit of an actual stretchy lunge. So this is the place where you want to think about your pelvis being super neutral. So think about tucking your pelvis, curling your pubic symphysis towards your belly button, and pressing your whole body forward so you can feel a little load through the front of this back thigh. Back leg is curled under, wall is near you. And then here you're going to start pressing into both feet, and you're going to see if you can just lift yourself up to standing. And since we're pretending this is real life, you can step forward as though you're going to now go off and make yourself some breakfast. But you're not, because what you're going to do is step back, and you're going to see if you can lower yourself back down in the same lunge and what happens here. And here, you want to watch for this last 2 inches, because that's the place when the clunking is likely to happen. So pressing up again, stepping forward. Let's step back with the other leg. Right leg bends and lowers. And you want to kind of try to keep the front leg at about 90 degrees here, not less than 90. Standing up, stepping forward. Other leg steps back. If you are finding that that last 2 inches causes you to lose control, the answer is always to move more, Anne. This is a good place for your half dome, because that raises the floor and maybe puts it within the range you can control. It's not particularly useful to work outside of your controlled range. You want to work at the edge of your controlled range, because that's where you don't just practice compensating. So let's do a couple more on this side. Let's come all the way down. So whatever leg you didn't start with in front, and we're just going to add that little stretch. So you can keep your knee on your dome if you have your dome. Curling your tailbone under you, dropping your ribs, sliding forward just to challenge the front of that hip a little bit. Super good. All right. So I think for fun, we're going to finish up with a little bit of rolling. So rolling is either super fun or super awful. And you can use it as a get-up, or you cannot use it as a get-up, but I think it would be fun to explore today. So you can bring yourself into a little curly ball and see if you can roll down to your mid-back and then roll up again a little bit. So if you want, you can use your legs. That'll help give you some momentum. And can you just roll back and forth a few times? Try to curl your head in. Take a good look at your belly button and keep looking at your belly button. You can use your legs here. I'm not too worried about the form of the roll. Notice as you're doing this whether your lower back feels like there's a lot of flat spots and there's a clunk, or whether you can make it really round. And if you notice some flat spots, then you especially need to make sure that you come to the next coaching call, because it's going to be all spinal mobility all the time. But what we're going for is the roundest, most rolly spine that we can get. And then take a little pause. Any questions about that, go ahead and put them up, and I'm going to start explaining where we're going to go with that. So ground, kind of the way your feet were during the roll. So that would be this shape. But of course, you could do lots of other things with your feet. So you could make the same number 4 shape that we were just making. And that's a nice one because from there, you could do a really good reach forward. So let's try that a few times. Yeah, Mira, I think so. Be gentle and see what that feels like for you. You could also maybe just work on the reaches. Yeah, be gentle, try a couple rolls and then focus on reaches. So try to moderate it out so you're not throwing 4,000 rolls at yourself. I think that's probably the right way to go. So if you're just reaching, then you've got one leg tucked under you, one leg in front, and you're going to do a nice big reach like that. It's great for your hips. And if you're adding the rolling, you're going to roll back, tuck one leg under, and turn this into your reach. And with the reach, you definitely can pull your butt up off the ground so that it's very similar to this movement that we were doing. Hi, Ella. So big reach with or without a roll. And you can switch sides. So one leg and then the other leg. If you really were a fan of that cross-legged reach we did, you could certainly come up in a cross-legged position here and reach forward. So the roll just makes all those reaches a little bit more dynamic, yeah? You could come up and lunge all the way up if you wanted to. So for that one, you're in your number 4, you reach forward, then you swivel your back leg around, press down, and lunge up. Swivel around, sit back down. Roll other side, so tucking the other side under, coming up, swiveling that back leg so it's straight behind you, and then coming up in this kind of mini lunge. This is not as beautiful a lunge as the last one we were practicing. And then for those of you who have it, you could turn this into the squat get up as well. So there, both legs are in this, I don't know what you call it, bent position, and you can come into a squat. So this is the way I tend to use to come up and down without the roll necessarily. I'll often just do a squat down. And that's a place where you may find the little bolstering will help you. So you don't need a roll for this. You could add a cushion under your butt and squat up and down from the ground a couple times. Okay? So you can see how that feels. And if your heels lift, if your knees come forward, so be it. Those are the things we work on over time. Let's all come down to the ground. We're going to finish up in that V-sit just because it's delicious. So come into your best V-sit. Bolster your pelvis for this one. Let yourself roll forward. Feel the load on your inner thighs. And here, you can just keep your hands on your legs and just sway your upper body a little bit side to side, just to enjoy that nice inner thigh load. All right. So I hope you enjoyed that and it gave you hopefully some floor sitting inspiration.